The medical bay of the orbital research station hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Chen worked to stabilize her patient. Chief Petty Officer Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez lay unconscious on the examination table, his massive frame making the standard-sized bed look inadequate. Blood seeped through the emergency bandages wrapped around his left shoulder and torso, evidence of the brutal firefight that had erupted 3 hours earlier when unknown hostiles had attacked the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Tank had been part of a 6-man SEAL team sent to evacuate the researchers when the first distress signals came through. What should have been a routine extraction had turned into a nightmare when the attackers revealed themselves to be something humanity had never encountered before. The other 5 members of his team hadn't made it back to the transport ship. Dr. Chen checked his vital signs for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Tank's physiology was remarkable even by SEAL standards. At 6 feet 4 inches and 240 pounds of muscle, he had survived wounds that would have killed most men. The alien weapon that had torn through his shoulder had missed his heart by mere inches. His body temperature was elevated but stable, his breathing deep and regular despite the trauma. "Doctor, we have incoming," called Lieutenant Morrison from the communications station. "3 unidentified vessels approaching fast. They're not responding to our hails." Chen looked up from her patient. The research station had minimal defenses, designed for scientific work rather than combat. The crew of 43 included researchers, engineers, and support staff, but only a handful had any military training. With Tank unconscious and their security team dead on the planet below, they were essentially defenseless. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. 15 minutes, maybe less. They're moving faster than anything in our database." Through the medical bay's viewport, Chen could see 3 sleek vessels approaching the station. They moved with an unnatural fluidity, their hull surfaces seeming to shift and ripple like liquid metal. The ships were roughly triangular, but with curves that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly process. Tank stirred on the table, his eyes opening slowly. Despite the pain medication, awareness returned to his dark eyes quickly. Years of combat training had conditioned him to assess threats immediately upon waking. "Doc, where are we?" His voice was rough but clear. "Orbital station above Kepler 442b. You've been unconscious for 3 hours. Your team—" "I know." Tank's jaw tightened. He had carried Petty Officer Williams to the extraction point, but Williams had died in his arms during the flight up. The others had fallen during the initial assault when the enemy had appeared out of nowhere, their weapons cutting through body armor like paper. "Chief, you need to stay still. You've lost a lot of blood and that shoulder needs proper surgery." Tank was already sitting up, ignoring the protest from his wounded body. "What's our situation?" Before Chen could answer, the lights in the medical bay flickered. A low vibration ran through the station's hull. Different from the normal engine harmonics, Tank recognized it immediately from his years of ship-to-ship combat experience. "They're scanning us," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Weapons scan, looking for defensive systems." "Chief, you're in no condition to—" "Doctor, how many combat-ready personnel do we have on this station?" Chen hesitated. "Besides you, maybe 6 people with basic weapons training." Tank nodded grimly. The aliens had come to finish what they started on the planet below. Whatever their reason for attacking the mining colony, they weren't going to leave witnesses. He had seen their capabilities firsthand. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best equipment, their tactics precise and brutal. "I need my gear," he said, standing despite the pain shooting through his torso. "Your equipment was damaged in the firefight. We only recovered your sidearm and some basic items." Tank looked around the medical bay, his tactical mind already working. The station's layout was similar to other orbital platforms he had trained on. The command center would be at the station's core, engineering below that, and the docking bays at the outer ring. If the aliens followed standard boarding procedures, they would try to capture the command center first. But these weren't standard enemies. Doctor, I need you to listen carefully. These things, whatever they are, they're not here to negotiate. They hit the colony like they had studied our defenses for months. They knew exactly where our people would be, how we would respond. Chen watched as Tank moved to the emergency supply locker, his movements careful but determined. The bandages around his shoulder were already showing fresh blood, but his hands remained steady. The wound on your shoulder goes deep, Chief. If you rupture those blood vessels, then I'll bleed out. But if I don't try to stop them, everyone on this station dies anyway. Tank retrieved his service pistol from the medical storage unit, checking the magazine automatically. 15 rounds of standard ammunition against an enemy that had shrugged off direct hits from military-grade plasma rifles. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the communication system, they could hear Lieutenant Morrison's increasingly frantic reports. They're not responding to any signals. Wait, I'm reading massive energy buildup on the lead vessel. Tank moved to the viewport and peered out at the approaching ships. The lead vessel was larger than the others, its strange hull now pulsing with veins of blue light. He had seen similar energy patterns just before the aliens had destroyed half the mining colony with some kind of directed energy weapon. They're charging weapons, he told Chen, but they're not targeting the station itself. How can you tell? Because we'd already be dead. Tank studied the aliens' formation. The 3 ships had arranged themselves in a precise triangle around the station, maintaining equal distance from each other. They're creating some kind of containment field. They want to board us. As if responding to his words, the blue energy from the 3 ships suddenly connected, forming brilliant lines between them. The research station was now trapped inside a triangular cage of alien energy. All personnel. This is command. Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom. We are being held by some kind of tractor field. All systems are functioning, but we cannot maneuver. Tank moved to the medical bay's communication panel and activated ship-wide communication. This is Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez to all personnel. We are about to be boarded by hostile forces. All non-essential personnel should move to the central safe rooms immediately. Anyone with weapons training should report to designated defense positions. This is not a drill. Chen stared at him. You can't fight in your condition. Doctor, I've been in worse shape and lived to tell about it. Tank checked his watch. In about 10 minutes, those ships are going to dock with us. When they do, things are going to get very ugly very fast. The station's hull rang like a bell as something metallic contacted the outer hull. Tank felt the vibration through the deck plating, different from normal docking procedures. Whatever the aliens were using to attach to the station, it wasn't following human engineering protocols. They're cutting through, he said, recognizing the pattern of vibrations. Multiple breach points. Tank moved toward the medical bay exit, then paused. Doctor, I need to ask you something important. When we fought these things on the planet, they seemed to know exactly how human weapons worked. They anticipated our tactics, our equipment, everything. What are you suggesting? That they've been studying us for a while. But there's something they might not understand about human psychology. Tank's eyes held a cold determination that made Chen take a step back. They expect us to be logical, to surrender when the odds are impossible. The lights flickered again and emergency klaxons began sounding throughout the station. Through the communication system, they could hear crew members reporting strange sounds from multiple sections of the station. Chief, they're coming through the hull in at least 4 different places. Morrison's voice was tight with fear. I'm reading movement in sections 7, 12, 15, and 21. Tank nodded. A coordinated multi-point assault, designed to divide and overwhelm the defenders. Military tactics, but adapted for their superior technology. They were treating this like a standard boarding operation against an inferior enemy. That's their first mistake, Tank said quietly. What? Assuming we'll behave like a defeated enemy. Tank moved toward the medical bay's emergency supplies, pulling out items that most people wouldn't consider weapons: medical scalpels, surgical tubing, emergency oxygen canisters. "Doctor, I need you to get to the central safe room with the other non-combatants. I'm not leaving you. You're not helping me by staying. I need to know you're safe so I can focus on stopping these things." The sound of emergency bulkheads slamming shut echoed through the station as automatic systems tried to contain the hull breaches. Tank knew it wouldn't work. If these aliens had technology advanced enough to hold an entire space station motionless, a few steel barriers wouldn't slow them down. "Chief, this is Morrison. They've breached the outer hull in all 4 locations. I'm tracking movement through the access corridors. Whatever they are, they're moving fast." Tank activated his communicator. "Morrison, how many crew members made it to the safe rooms?" 37. "We have 6 people at defensive positions, but Chief, our weapons aren't going to do much good. The reports from the planet said their personal armor deflected direct plasma hits." "Copy that. Maintain positions, but do not engage until I give the order. Let them come to us." Tank turned back to Chen. "Doctor, this is your last chance to get to safety." "These aliens on the planet, how did they fight?" Tank considered the question. "Like machines, precise, coordinated, efficient. They moved through our positions like they had blueprints of our tactics manual. But they killed your team. They killed soldiers who fought exactly the way soldiers are supposed to fight. By the book, with standard weapons and conventional tactics." Tank's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "But SEALs aren't conventional soldiers, Doctor. We're problem solvers." The medical bay's main door suddenly buckled inward, metal screeching against metal. Whatever was on the other side possessed incredible physical strength. Tank moved Chen behind the examination table and drew his sidearm. "When that door opens, hit the deck and stay down no matter what happens." The door buckled again, and this time they could see claws or tools cutting through the reinforced steel like butter. Sparks flew as the metal parted, revealing glimpses of something moving beyond. Tank took position behind a medical cabinet, his pistol aimed at the entrance. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, but his hands remained steady. He had been in impossible situations before. The key was never to let the enemy dictate the terms of engagement. The door burst open with a sound like thunder, and Tank got his first clear look at humanity's new enemy. The creature that entered the medical bay was roughly humanoid, but wrong in every detail. It stood 7 feet tall, its body covered in some kind of biomechanical armor that seemed to be part of its skin. Its head was elongated, with multiple eyes that glowed with an internal light. Its arms ended in hands that could apparently shift between fingers and cutting tools at will. But what struck Tank most was how it moved. Perfectly balanced, with the fluid grace of something that had never known fear or uncertainty. It turned its multiple eyes toward his position with the casual confidence of a predator that had never encountered effective resistance. Tank held his fire. 1 shot, maybe 2 if he was lucky, then the thing would be on him. He needed to make them count, but more importantly, he needed to learn how this enemy thought. The alien moved into the room, its head scanning methodically. It completely ignored Dr. Chen, who was pressed against the floor behind the examination table. Its attention focused entirely on the areas where an armed defender might hide. Professional, Tank thought. It's prioritizing threats based on capability, not proximity. The alien moved toward his position, its footsteps silent despite its size. Tank could see that its armor had no obvious weak points, no gaps or joints that might be vulnerable to small arms fire. But every piece of equipment, no matter how advanced, had limitations. As the creature rounded the medical cabinet, Tank stepped out and fired 2 shots center mass. The bullet struck the alien's torso and ricocheted off harmlessly, just as the reports from the planet had indicated. But Tank wasn't trying to hurt it. He was testing its reflexes. The alien moved to counterattack with mechanical precision, its right hand shifting into what looked like a blade as it closed the distance between them. Fast, but not faster than human reflexes. Powerful, but bound by the same laws of physics that governed human movement. Tank threw himself backward, rolling behind another piece of medical equipment as the alien's blade cut through the air where his head had been. The creature pursued him with relentless efficiency, but Tank noticed something crucial. It wasn't adapting its tactics to account for the confined space or the medical equipment. It was following a programmed response pattern, treating this like a standard engagement in open terrain. That was its second mistake. Tank grabbed a surgical tray and hurled it at the alien's head, not to cause damage, but to test its reactions. The creature's left hand moved to deflect the tray with the same mechanical precision, its attention momentarily divided. In that split second, Tank did something no military manual would recommend. Instead of maintaining distance or seeking cover, he charged directly at the 7-foot-tall alien warrior, diving low toward its legs. The creature had been programmed to deal with human soldiers who used human tactics. But Tank wasn't fighting like a soldier anymore. He was fighting like someone with nothing left to lose. His shoulder slammed into the alien's knees with all his remaining strength, and for the first time since the attack began, something unexpected happened. The alien staggered. The alien warrior stumbled backward, its multiple eyes flashing with what Tank could only interpret as confusion. In all its programmed combat scenarios, no human had ever abandoned defensive tactics to launch a direct physical assault. Tank pressed his advantage, ignoring the fire spreading through his wounded shoulder as he grappled with the creature's legs. The alien's balance was perfect for standing and fighting, but it had never been trained to deal with someone attacking its foundation. Tank wrapped his arms around the creature's ankles and twisted, using his body weight to topple the 7-foot warrior. They crashed to the medical bay floor together, Tank rolling away as the alien's blade hand swept through the space where his head had been. The creature's armor scraped against the deck plating with a sound like grinding metal, and Tank saw his opportunity. Every piece of advanced armor had joints, places where different components met. As the alien rolled to regain its feet, Tank spotted a gap where the creature's neck armor connected to its torso protection. The opening was barely an inch wide, but Tank had made harder shots under worse conditions. He drew his combat knife from his boot and lunged forward, driving the blade toward the narrow gap. The alien's reflexes kicked in, its left hand moving to block, but Tank had anticipated this. At the last second, he shifted his angle, and the knife slid between armor plates. The creature's reaction was immediate and violent. It let out a sound like static mixed with grinding gears, its body convulsing as Tank's blade found something vital beneath the armor. But instead of falling, the alien grabbed Tank with both hands and hurled him across the medical bay. Tank hit the far wall hard, his vision going white as pain exploded through his injured shoulder. Blood was flowing freely now, soaking through the bandages Dr. Chen had applied. But he had learned something crucial about their enemy. They could be hurt. The alien was on its feet again, but Tank could see dark fluid seeping from the wound in its neck. It moved differently now, less smoothly, its head tilted at an odd angle. The knife was still embedded in its armor, and every movement seemed to cause the creature pain. "Chief!" Dr. Chen's voice cut through the ringing in Tank's ears. "Behind you!" Tank rolled to the side just as another alien warrior burst through the medical bay's secondary entrance. This one was different from the first, its armor configured differently, its weapons more elaborate. It moved with the same mechanical precision, but its multiple eyes immediately locked onto Tank with what seemed like personal interest. Tank realized with growing unease that these creatures were communicating somehow. The second alien knew exactly what had happened to its companion. Knew that this lone human had found a way to hurt them. "Doctor, get out of here now!" Tank shouted as he scrambled to his feet. His shoulder was screaming in protest, his vision blurring from blood loss, but 2 against 1 in a confined space was suicide even if he was at full strength. The wounded alien moved to block the main exit, while the newcomer advanced from the secondary door. Tank found himself trapped between them, backed against the medical equipment with nowhere to run. The new alien spoke, its voice a combination of electronic tones and organic sounds that human vocal cords could never produce. Tank didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. They were no longer treating him as a standard enemy soldier. Tank grabbed a medical scanner from the nearby equipment tray and hurled it at the nearest alien. The device shattered against the creature's armor harmlessly, but it bought him a second to think. 2 aliens, both armed, both with superior technology and physical capabilities. Conventional wisdom said to surrender and hope for mercy. But Tank had learned something about these creatures during their attack on the mining colony. They didn't take prisoners. The unwounded alien raised its right arm, revealing a weapon that Tank recognized from the reports. Some kind of energy projector that had cut through reinforced bunkers like tissue paper. At this range, Tank's body armor would provide about as much protection as wet paper. Instead of trying to dodge, Tank did something that violated every combat manual ever written. He charged directly toward the alien with the energy weapon, roaring at the top of his lungs. The creature hesitated for a fraction of a second, its programming struggling to process why a wounded human would attack instead of seeking cover. That hesitation was all Tank needed. He tackled the alien around the waist, driving both of them backward into the medical equipment. Instruments and supplies scattered as they hit the deck, Tank using his momentum to stay on top of the creature. The alien's energy weapon discharged into the ceiling, cutting a molten line across the metal panels. Tank grabbed the creature's weapon arm with both hands, fighting to control it as the alien tried to bring the energy projector to bear. The creature was stronger than him, but Tank had spent 20 years learning how to fight bigger, stronger opponents. He used the alien's own strength against it, redirecting the weapon arm into the nearby medical cabinet. The energy beam sliced through the cabinet's metal structure like butter, sending medical supplies flying. Tank felt the heat from the weapon singing the hair on his arms, but he held on grimly, forcing the alien to destroy its own surroundings. The wounded alien was moving to help its companion, but its injury was slowing it down. Dark fluid continued to leak from the gap in its neck armor, and its movements were becoming increasingly erratic. Tank made a desperate gamble. Still controlling the second alien's weapon arm, he twisted it toward the wounded creature. The energy beam caught the injured alien's center mass, and the result was spectacular. The wounded creature's armor didn't just fail, it exploded outward in a shower of sparks and organic debris. The blast threw Tank and the remaining alien in opposite directions, both stunned by the unexpected detonation. Tank hit the floor hard, his vision swimming. Through the smoke and debris, he could see the remaining alien struggling to its feet. Its armor was scorched but intact, and its multiple eyes were now focused on Tank with what could only be described as rage. The creature spoke again, its electronic voice carrying clear overtones of fury. It had watched its companion die, had seen a primitive human-use superior alien technology against them. Whatever protocols had been governing its behavior were apparently no longer in effect. Tank tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. The blood loss from his shoulder wound was catching up to him, and the impact with the floor had reopened other injuries from the original firefight. He could feel consciousness slipping away despite his efforts to stay alert. The alien moved toward him slowly, deliberately. It had learned from watching its companion's mistakes. No more mechanical responses, no more programmed tactics. This was personal now. Through the medical bay's communication system, Tank could hear reports from throughout the station. The other boarding teams had encountered the remaining human defenders, and the results were predictably one-sided. Weapons fire echoed through the corridors, followed by the sounds of cutting tools and alien voices. "Chief Rodriguez, this is Morrison," came the frantic voice over the comm. "They've taken decks 7 and 12. We've lost contact with the defensive teams. Chief, are you receiving?" Tank reached for his communicator with his good arm, but the alien knocked it away with casual contempt. It wanted him alive for questioning, Tank realized. They needed to understand how a lone human had managed to kill one of their warriors. The creature grabbed Tank by his injured shoulder and hauled him to his feet. The pain was blinding, but it also cleared his head momentarily. Through the medical bay's viewport, Tank could see more alien ships arriving. Not just 3 now, but dozens of the strange vessels surrounding the research station. Whatever humanity had stumbled into, it was bigger than a simple raid on a mining colony. These creatures were part of something vast, organized, and utterly hostile to human existence. The alien holding him spoke in that electronic voice, apparently trying to communicate. When Tank didn't respond, the creature tightened its grip on his shoulder, sending fresh waves of agony through his body. But pain was just another form of information, and Tank had been trained to process information under stress. As the alien interrogated him in its incomprehensible language, Tank was studying its armor, its weapons, its movement patterns. Every piece of equipment had weaknesses. Every system had failure points. Every enemy made mistakes. Through the viewport, Tank could see something that made his blood run cold. The newly arrived alien ships weren't just surrounding the research station, they were deploying some kind of massive device between them. A structure of impossible complexity was taking shape in space, connected to the ships by streams of that same blue energy that had originally trapped the station. Whatever they were building, it wasn't good for humanity. The alien questioning him seemed to notice his attention shifting to the viewport. It turned its multiple eyes toward the construction outside, then back to Tank. The message was clear. Resistance was futile, and Tank was about to witness the beginning of something terrible. But the creature had made a mistake in letting Tank see the construction, because now Tank understood what the aliens were really after. The research station wasn't just a random target. The mining operation on Kepler 442b wasn't just an unfortunate discovery. The researchers here had been working on something specific, something that had attracted alien attention from across the galaxy. Dr. Chen had mentioned it briefly during his treatment. Quantum tunneling research, experiments in faster-than-light communication. The kind of technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy if it fell into the wrong hands. The aliens weren't here to destroy humanity. They were here to steal humanity's secrets. Tank felt a cold fury building in his chest, different from the adrenaline-fueled rage of combat. These creatures had killed his team, were slaughtering innocent researchers, and now they planned to steal human discoveries and use them for their own purposes. The alien holding him spoke again, its tone becoming more urgent. Other alien voices could be heard throughout the station now, coordinating their search. They were looking for something specific, Tank realized. Research data, prototypes, perhaps key personnel. Dr. Chen. Tank's heart rate spiked as he remembered the doctor's background. She wasn't just a medical officer. Her file had mentioned advanced degrees in quantum physics and xenobiology. She was one of the research team leaders, someone who would have intimate knowledge of the station's most sensitive projects. The aliens weren't just eliminating witnesses. They were gathering intelligence assets. Tank looked up at the creature holding him and smiled. The expression seemed to unsettle the alien, its multiple eyes blinking in what might have been confusion. "You made another mistake," Tank said quietly. The alien tilted its elongated head, apparently trying to understand human speech patterns. "You assumed I was the biggest threat on this station." Tank's voice was steady despite the pain coursing through his body. "But I'm just a soldier. The real prize is down the corridor in the central safe room, along with 37 other potential intelligence sources." Tank could see understanding dawn in the creature's multiple eyes. It had been so focused on the immediate tactical threat that it had lost sight of the strategic objective. The alien spoke rapidly into some kind of communication device built into its armor. "That's right," Tank continued conversationally. "While you've been playing games with me, your target has been sitting in a reinforced bunker with limited air supplies and no way out. But here's the thing about human nature that your programmers apparently didn't understand." The alien's grip on his shoulder tightened, and Tank could hear more alien voices responding to its call. They were converging on the medical bay, drawn by their companion's report of success. "We don't just fight for ourselves, we fight for each other." Tank's hand moved slowly toward his boot, where a backup weapon was concealed. "And when someone threatens our people, we stop thinking about odds and start thinking about solutions." The alien noticed his movement and raised its energy weapon, but Tank wasn't trying to draw a gun. His fingers found the emergency beacon he had activated during the initial attack, the one that would have been broadcasting a distress signal on military frequencies. The alien studied the small device, apparently unable to determine if it posed a threat. After a moment, it crushed the beacon with its free hand and discarded the pieces. Tank smiled again. Too late. Through the medical bay's shattered door, Tank could hear the sound of human voices in the corridor. Not the panicked cries of civilians, but the controlled communications of military personnel coordinating an assault. The cavalry had arrived. Tank's distress signal had been received by the nearest military vessel, a destroyer that had been conducting patrol operations 2 systems away. Fast response teams were humanity's answer to the vast distances of space. Small, highly mobile units that could reach crisis zones while larger fleets were still organizing. The alien holding Tank spoke urgently into its communication device, but the response it received seemed to agitate the creature further. Tank could guess what its commanders were telling it. Eliminate the intelligence assets and withdraw immediately. But the alien was trapped now, caught between its wounded prisoner and the approaching human reinforcements. It could kill Tank and try to escape, but that would mean abandoning its mission objectives. Tank could see the creature weighing its options, its multiple eyes shifting between him and the corridor entrance. The sounds of approaching humans were getting closer, along with what sounded like weapons fire from other parts of the station. "Here's what's going to happen," Tank said quietly. "In about 30 seconds, a team of very angry Marines is going to come through that door. They're going to see a wounded SEAL being held by an alien that's killed their people, and they're going to react exactly the way Marines always react to that situation." The alien's energy weapon swiveled toward the door, but Tank could see uncertainty in its posture. It was no longer dealing with a tactical problem it could solve with superior technology. "You could shoot me and try to escape," Tank continued, "but that would mean admitting that one injured human forced you to abandon your mission. That's going to look real good in your after-action report." Tank could hear human voices just outside the medical bay now, along with the distinctive sound of military equipment being deployed. The Marines had arrived in force, and they were preparing for a direct assault on the alien positions. The creature holding Tank made its decision. Instead of fleeing or fighting, it pressed the energy weapon against Tank's temple and spoke in clear, electronically translated English, "Human soldiers will withdraw, or this one dies." Tank felt the heat from the weapon against his skin and realized that his gamble hadn't worked the way he had planned. The alien was using him as a human shield, counting on humanity's reluctance to sacrifice their own people. But Tank had one more card to play, something the alien's tactical programming couldn't have anticipated. Because while the creature had been focused on Tank as a prisoner and intelligence source, it had forgotten the most basic fact about Navy SEALs. They were weapons designed to accomplish their mission regardless of personal cost. Tank looked directly at the medical bay's entrance and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Marines! Target of opportunity! Take the shot!" The alien's multiple eyes went wide as it realized what Tank had just done. The human had deliberately marked himself as an acceptable casualty to ensure the mission's success. For the first time since the attack began, Tank saw something in the alien's expression that looked like genuine fear. The silence that followed Tank's shout stretched for exactly 4 seconds. In the first second, the alien warrior processed Tank's words and realized that its human prisoner had just sacrificed himself to break the tactical stalemate. The creature's multiple eyes widened as it understood that all its careful planning and superior technology meant nothing if humans were willing to die to complete their objectives. In the second second, Tank felt the alien's grip on his shoulder loosen slightly as the creature's attention shifted toward the medical bay entrance. Through his peripheral vision, Tank could see movement in the corridor beyond, the distinctive silhouettes of Marines in full combat armor positioning themselves for a coordinated assault. In the third second, Tank made his move. Instead of trying to break free or attack the alien's weapon, he did something that no tactical manual in the galaxy could have predicted. He grabbed the alien's wrist with both hands and jerked the energy weapon away from his own head, directly toward his wounded shoulder. In the fourth second, as the alien's finger reflexively tightened on the trigger, Tank twisted the weapon's aim one final time. The energy beam that should have killed him instead struck the alien warrior in the center of its elongated skull. The result was catastrophic. The creature's head exploded outward in a shower of organic debris and sparking electronics. The biomechanical armor that had seemed invincible suddenly became a liability, conducting the energy weapon's discharge through the alien's entire nervous system. The warrior's body convulsed once, then collapsed to the deck in a smoking heap. Tank fell with it, his strength finally giving out, but he was smiling as darkness closed in around the edges of his vision. The alien had been so focused on maintaining tactical superiority that it had never considered the possibility of a human using its own weapon against it at point-blank range. "Medical team to the medical bay immediately!" The voice cut through Tank's fading consciousness. Heavy footsteps echoed through the room as Marines in powered armor swept in, their weapons trained on the alien's smoking remains. "Chief Rodriguez, stay with us!" Tank recognized the voice of Gunnery Sergeant Williams, a Marine he had worked with during training exercises on Luna Base. "Corpsman! I need a corpsman in here now!" Tank tried to respond, but his vocal cords weren't cooperating. The blood loss from his shoulder wound, combined with the various impacts he had endured during the fight, had finally overwhelmed his body's ability to function. But his mind was still working, still processing the tactical situation. Through the medical bay's damaged viewport, Tank could see that the alien construction in space had stopped growing. The energy connections between their ships were flickering erratically, and several of the vessels appeared to be moving away from the research station. "Chief, can you hear me?" Sergeant Williams was kneeling beside him, his armored fingers working to apply emergency medical supplies to Tank's shoulder. "We need to know what happened here. How many hostiles were in this section?" Tank managed to focus his eyes on Williams's face, visible through the Marine's helmet visor. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of intensity that came from extensive combat training but limited actual battlefield experience. The kind of Marine who followed procedures and trusted in superior firepower to solve problems. "2?" Tank whispered, his voice barely audible. "Both down? But Sergeant—" "Save your strength, Chief. Medical team's on the way. Listen to me." Tank grabbed Williams's armored wrist with his good hand, summoning enough strength to make his words clear. "These things, they think like machines, programmed responses. But they're learning." Williams nodded, but Tank could see the confusion in the young Marine's eyes. He was thinking about this like a conventional enemy engagement, where superior firepower and established tactics would eventually prevail. "They studied us, Sergeant. Before they attacked the colony, they studied how humans fight, our weapons, our tactics, our psychology." Tank's grip tightened on William's wrist. "Traditional military responses won't work against them." "Understood, Chief. We'll adapt our tactics as needed. Tank shook his head weakly. Williams still didn't understand. The alien in the medical bay hadn't been defeated by superior training or better equipment. It had been beaten by a wounded man who refused to follow logical tactical doctrine. Dr. Chen appeared at Tank's side, her face pale but determined. She had managed to reach the medical bay despite the ongoing firefight throughout the station, bringing with her a full emergency medical kit. "Chief, I need you to stay still while I work on this shoulder," she said, her hands already moving to assess his injuries. "The bleeding has gotten worse, and you may have damaged the subclavian artery." Tank nodded but kept his attention focused on Sergeant Williams. "How many Marines came with you?" "2 squads, Chief. 18 Marines plus support personnel. We launched from the destroyer as soon as your distress signal reached us." "What about the alien ships?" Williams glanced toward the viewport, where the alien construction was still visible despite its apparent malfunction. "Command is tracking 37 enemy vessels in the immediate area. Additional alien ships are arriving every few minutes." Tank felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. 18 Marines against potentially hundreds of alien warriors, each one equipped with technology that made human weapons look like stone tools. Even if the Marines fought perfectly, they would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Sergeant, you need to evacuate everyone on this station immediately." "Negative, Chief. Our orders are to secure the station and neutralize all hostile forces." Tank closed his eyes. Fighting against the exhaustion that threatened to claim him, Williams was thinking like a Marine, focused on completing the assigned mission regardless of cost. But this wasn't a situation where Marines could simply overwhelm the enemy through superior training and firepower. "Dr. Chen," Tank said quietly, "tell him about the research." Chen looked up from her work on Tank's shoulder, her expression grim. "The quantum tunneling research. They're not just trying to kill us, Sergeant. They're trying to steal our experimental data on faster-than-light communication." Williams' helmet display flickered as he accessed the station's database. Tank could see his expression change as he read the classified research files. "Jesus Christ," the sergeant whispered. "If this technology falls into enemy hands, it changes the balance of power in the galaxy," Tank finished. "Every military engagement, every strategic decision, everything depends on communication speed across interstellar distances. Whoever controls that technology controls space warfare." Williams activated his communication system. "Command, this is Williams. We have a situation that requires immediate strategic assessment." Tank listened as Williams reported the situation to his commanding officer aboard the destroyer. The conversation was brief but intense, with multiple references to classified protocols and strategic contingencies that Tank wasn't cleared to know about. When Williams finished his report, his expression was troubled. "Chief, Command wants to speak with you directly." Tank accepted the communication headset that Williams offered, despite Dr. Chen's protests about his condition. A familiar voice came through the speakers, one that Tank recognized from his day's training with Joint Special Operations. "Chief Rodriguez, this is Admiral Hendricks. I need to know your assessment of enemy capabilities." Tank had worked with Hendricks during the Titan crisis 5 years earlier, when terrorist cells had threatened the outer colony mining operations. The Admiral was old-school military, a tactician who understood that sometimes the mission required unconventional solutions. "Admiral, these aliens have technology that's centuries ahead of ours, but they think like computers. They have programmed responses for every standard human military tactic. What's your recommendation, Chief?" Tank looked around the medical bay at the remains of the 2 alien warriors he had defeated. Neither victory had come from superior firepower or conventional tactics. Both had resulted from doing things that violated standard military doctrine. "Don't fight them like soldiers, Admiral. Fight them like humans." There was a pause on the communication line. When Hendricks spoke again, his tone was carefully controlled. "Explain." They expect logical responses to tactical situations. Retreat when overwhelmed, surrender when outgunned, negotiate when facing superior force. But humans don't always do the logical thing. Tank could hear other voices in the background of the Admiral's communication, presumably other officers discussing the tactical situation. The destroyer would be vastly outgunned by the alien fleet, but it also represented humanity's only chance to escape with the quantum tunneling research data. Chief, I'm going to ask you to do something that goes against every regulation in the book. Tank managed a weak smile. Wouldn't be the first time, Admiral. We need someone to coordinate with the station's research team and ensure that the experimental data is either evacuated or destroyed. Someone who understands how these aliens think. Sir, I'm in no condition to... You're the only person who has successfully engaged these hostiles in close combat and survived. According to Sergeant Williams's report, you've eliminated 2 alien warriors using conventional weapons and improvised tactics. Tank felt Dr. Chen's hand tighten on his arm, a silent protest against what the Admiral was suggesting. But Tank understood the strategic situation better than anyone else on the station. The aliens weren't going to give up and leave. They would keep attacking until they either secured the research data or confirmed its destruction. What do you need me to do, Admiral? The station's central computer core contains approximately 15 years of experimental data on quantum tunneling technology. The aliens have been trying to access it, but the security protocols are holding for now. How long until they break through? Best estimate is 30 minutes, maybe less. They've been adapting their intrusion software each time our defenses stop them. Tank nodded, learning and adapting, just like they had done with human military tactics. But computer security was different from combat. It was a purely logical exercise governed by mathematical principles rather than human psychology. Admiral, what if we gave them what they want? The communication line went silent for several seconds. When Hendricks spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Explain your thinking, Chief. They expect us to defend the data with everything we have. Maximum security protocols, armed resistance, self-destruct systems as a last resort, standard human behavior when protecting valuable assets. Tank could see Sergeant Williams listening intently, along with several other Marines who had gathered in the medical bay. Dr. Chen had finished working on his shoulder and was monitoring his vital signs, but her expression showed that she was also following the tactical discussion. But what if we let them access the data? What if we made it easy for them? Chief, that technology could give them an insurmountable strategic advantage. Only if it works, Admiral. Tank's voice grew stronger as the adrenaline of forming a plan overcame his physical exhaustion. But what if the data they steal isn't quite right? What if there are subtle errors in the quantum equations, mistakes that wouldn't be obvious until they tried to build actual hardware? Tank could hear Admiral Hendricks discussing the idea with his staff officers. The conversation was muted, but he could catch fragments about acceptable risks and strategic deception. Dr. Chen, Tank said quietly, how accurate would the experimental data need to be for someone to successfully replicate your results? Chen considered the question carefully. The quantum field calculations have to be precise to within 12 decimal places. Even a small error in the mathematical constants would cause catastrophic failure during testing. And how difficult would it be to introduce those kinds of errors into the database? Extremely difficult if you wanted to maintain the appearance of valid data. The equations are interconnected. Change one variable, and you'd have to adjust dozens of related calculations to maintain mathematical consistency. Tank smiled despite the pain in his shoulder. But you could do it? Theoretically, yes. But it would take hours to properly modify the entire database, and we don't have that kind of time. Tank activated his communication with Admiral Hendricks. Sir, I have a proposition for you. Go ahead, Chief. Give me 20 minutes alone with Dr. Chen and access to the central computer core. I think we can solve 2 problems at once. Admiral Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Chief, Are you proposing what I think you're proposing? Sometimes the best way to win is to let the enemy think they're winning, Admiral. These aliens have been studying human psychology, but they may not understand human creativity. Approved. Sergeant Williams, you will provide Chief Rodriguez with whatever support he needs. Dr. Chen, you are hereby temporarily assigned to Chief Rodriguez's mission team. Williams nodded, though Tank could see uncertainty in the young Marine's expression. Giving classified research data to the enemy, even corrupted data, went against every principle of military security. But Tank had learned something during his fight with the aliens in the medical bay. Sometimes the most effective tactic was the one that made no logical sense. Doctor, I need you to help me get to the central computer core, Tank said as he struggled to sit up. And then I need you to teach me how to sabotage 15 years of quantum physics research in a way that looks completely legitimate. Chen stared at him for a moment, then smiled with the kind of expression that Tank had seen on the faces of fellow SEALs when they realized they were about to attempt something impossibly dangerous. Chief, I think I'm beginning to understand how you beat those aliens. Tank managed to stand with Williams's help, his vision swimming but his determination intact. Through the medical bay's viewport, he could see more alien ships arriving, their strange hulls glowing with that familiar blue energy. They thought they were winning. They thought they understood human psychology and human tactics, but they were about to learn something that no amount of study could have prepared them for. When humans were backed into a corner, they didn't just fight back. They got creative. And creativity, Tank realized, might be the one human trait that alien programming could never fully anticipate or counter. The battle for the research station was far from over, but for the first time since the attack began, Tank felt like humanity might have a chance to win. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the one thing that made humans truly dangerous in the galaxy. Their ability to do the unexpected when everything was on the line. As Tank hobbled toward the door with Sergeant Williams's support, he could hear the alien ships outside beginning to coordinate their final assault on the station. They had 30 minutes to complete their mission before the enemy overwhelmed their defenses. It was going to be the longest 30 minutes of his life. But Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez had spent 20 years learning how to accomplish impossible missions in impossible time frames, and he had never failed to bring his people home.